Welcome. Today we're going to start with a heart exercise. This is a Hawaiian heart exercise. It's a really beautiful, simple tool called the kulike. And as we do this exercise, I'm going to take you through what I've been processing in disgust, my emotions of disgust and numbness to disgust, and I think it's going to be pretty powerful, a powerful sharing. It's an article that I wrote yesterday, just on my processing of all that's happening for me. So, to do this exercise, it can be eyes open or closed. I like closed to start with, but it's the right hand on the heart and the left hand is on the gut. And just take a deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth, and just relaxing your hands and your chest, both hands, and feeling the energy flow through you as though your hands are embracing you. And you can imagine yourself loving yourself. Is this practice of self-love. And this is the article that I wrote yesterday. I was a silent racist, homophobe, vengeful, anti-evil, anti-fat, anti-non-smart, anti-devil, anti-dark souls, anti-non-Christian, self-righteous dick. I say was because I no longer have these charged feelings anymore which powered the disgust and the hatred. I say silent because I never had the balls to do anything to react towards these feelings. Essentially, I was more scared of acting out angrily, badly, as to how I truly felt, versus the wrath of my parents, school, and society who would have punished me severely. I learned a behavior to feel guilty about my racist and other divisive charged feelings at any time they arose, to feel scared of these feelings, to shut them down, as I knew these feelings were not right. This was my shadow. This was my darkness. And this continued regardless of how much I shamed myself or how much I felt shamed and judged by others. Like an addiction, bullying down these intensely divisive feelings, such as saying, "Chris, everybody is human, just like you. Chris, you are a bad person. Chris, shame on you. Chris, stop being a dick." These could not stop my feelings from arising and only encouraged them to rise more intensely. The little boy Chris, who had learned that to be safe and protect himself from being bullied at school was to also be racist and divisive, and to be silent to it when it was happening, just like the other children. And this was painfully etched into me as a mold, a pain of myself and others which I numbed myself to. And these highly charged feelings only dimmed out when I could finally acknowledge my anger, become intimate with my fear, embrace my shame, and welcome my disgust into my heart. All the pain and hurt was taken in my heart. This is the inner work or shadow work, as some may say. It's the walk of the middle way and the walk of the heart, to accept and embrace myself more, self-love. And by loving myself more, I had also found love for others, all others, which continues to grow as I continue to find more ways to love myself. And to everybody I have hurt by my silence to your bullying and divisiveness, when you were called horrible names and I stood there, relieved that I was safe, and said nothing, did nothing, felt nothing, that led to your pain. I feel your pain and my remorse, and I'm truly, truly sorry. I just invite you to deeply feel into that. Remember back to your school days, childhood. This is the energy of disgust. And at its extreme form is the energy of hatred. And so coming back with me when you're ready. So last week we were talking about the inbuilt system we have in all of our human bodies that is designed to keep us safe, to keep others safe, and is designed to protect us and to protect others. Where did this system fail for me and for so many other people? And how does it work? So we began last week with talking about emotional resonance. We delved into it just a little bit. And this system, this protection and safety system that's built into our body, has an ability to feel and feel deeply what we are feeling and what others are feeling, right? Emotions are just waves of energy which permeate through everything, and they have a distance. They only trickle in amplitude the further out we go in space. But if you sit next to someone, or you're in someone's embrace, you can feel there is a resonance there. And that resonance is truly what I believe to be the most unique and amazing feature of these human bodies versus a robot. The thing about emotional resonance, especially as children, is that we don't know what's ours and what's someone else's. Everything that we feel, even in the womb when our gut is developed, is all-encompassing everything. There's no separation to the emotion. It's just everything that everyone is feeling around us. And so even in the womb, when we feel an emotion of our mothers or our fathers, we think that that's ours. We have no ability to understand what's mine and what's yours. And so through a lot of this work, I've come to this realization. My truth of it is that when our mothers and our fathers are feeling scared of something, not related to us at all, it might be a work scenario, it might be financial stability, it might be whatever fear is arising. We feel that fear. And we don't know that that's not ours. All we know is ourselves. And so actually my feeling as I felt into this deeply was I began to feel scared of my being, because that's really all I know at that time. And if they felt shame, I felt shamed for my being. And if they felt disgust and hatred, I felt disgust and hatred at my being. I didn't know that that wasn't mine. And most parents don't, and mothers don't talk to communicate with their children in their womb. And tell them, hey, this is something I'm going through. It's not for you. This isn't yours. Don't take this on. Because there's no communication with the outside world. There's even less ability to know that what's ours is just ours, our own being. And this is the importance of communicating, of recognizing that this being, us, who were in the womb, had a consciousness. Right. So we start learning, we start taking on these emotions from the 0 point of our fetus, from when the gut is formed. We start really being able to feel it. And so, but the thing is, as we grow up, we start to learn concepts about, okay, what's mine, what are my emotions, and what are someone else's emotions. But to be able to feel someone else's emotions means I must be able to feel into mine, because it's a resonance. I can't perceive through someone else's senses. I can't see what someone else is seeing through their eyes. I can't hear what someone else is hearing through their ears. Just like any other sense, it's a personal thing. So I can only feel emotions from my own perspective, right? But I can feel what someone else next to me is feeling because of a resonance. It's a common waveform. Just like I can see what someone else is seeing if the object's in front of me also, but I see it through my eyes. And so I'm going to pause here and just check for questions.
No questions, but Chris, that was beautiful. I really, think that that's a key factor. Mentioning the concept of you do not hear with someone else's ears, you hear with your own. And in that understanding, you can see how you could lose a lot of information.
Yep. And this kind of touches on where we feel supported or we don't feel supported. And so if we are numb to an emotion such as grief or sadness, and someone is sitting next to us, it may be our children, it may be our parents, it may be whoever that is, and they're feeling sad, and we don't have that resonance, they're unable to feel supported by us. And so they feel unseen, unheard, unfelt, misunderstood, right? And so we come back to where did my body and my system fail? I say fail, but where did it break? When I was unable to feel the other children's hurt when they were being bullied. Where did that fail? There's really, in that scenario, we as children learn behaviors that keep us safe and protect us. And what I learned in these scenarios was that in order for me to be safe and protected meant that I had to ignore, not take action, to be silent, to divisiveness, to bullying. That was my coping mechanism to keep me safe. And I had to numb myself out to the pain that was being inflicted everywhere, to in fact the pain that was all around me, that was being thrown everywhere. We were just hurting, everyone was hurting. And so I learnt this behavior. And what happens is this behavior becomes trapped in my body. The energy of disgust, which in its healthy form is supposed to separate us from toxicity. So disgust in a healthy behavior sense is when we smell some food that's rotting, it's off. And we pull it from the kitchen, it's been sitting there, we smell it, oh. So it divides us from poison, things that are harmful to us. And when that's trapped in our body, we have to find ways to express that. And often it's in the schoolyard. And what happens is these children are probably being bullied at home, and it's all trapped in their body. All of this disgust energy is trapped. And it's unleashed at school. And we're just passing on the hurt. And so to this point, I want to lead into a concept that I call emotional weaponization. And I'm going to share with you a screen from our website. That is a whole bunch of jargon that I've attempted to demystify. But emotional weaponization, I feel, is truly a concept we need to bring back to mainstream. A really good understanding and deep understanding of how we have weaponized our emotions. And so let me give you an example of what I would term an emotional weaponization. It's, for instance, saying something like, Mary or Johnny, this is the fourth time I've had to repeat this to you. You need to cut the vegetables thinner. I don't understand why you don't listen to me. It's just not that hard. So what's happened in that moment is we've loaded a whole bunch of emotions. Shame, fear, disgust, and wrapped it in an angry delivery, in a way to control another person. We've projected our emotions to another person, and that's what I would call just simply narcissistic bullying, even though it may be for the best intentions. And so therefore, Mary or Johnny, who's just experienced that bomb, that shame bomb, that fear bomb, that disgust bomb, responds to it in a different way. It may lock in his body as a form of conditioning, so then potentially creates this aspect of ourselves we call the inner critic or the inner saboteur, which can rise and shame Mary or Johnny or make them feel scared of making the same mistake again. And Johnny and Mary are hurting deeply when this happens. They're feeling pain. And remember back to your childhoods when this was said, when these types of sentences were said to you. And the more they happen, when they go over and over and over and over again, we either start to go numb to it and feel nothing, because we've been hurt so many times, and this is now my new coping mechanism, to go numb. So numbness is one type of coping mechanism on a spectrum. On the other side of the spectrum is what a lot of people say is the empath, or the oversensitive, very, very high, not oversensitive, just highly sensitive individual who everything is very intense for them. All these feelings are very intense. And the reaction that they generally have is lash out in anger at themselves, at other people. And so there's two spectrums to this feeling and to this sensation, two polar opposites to this feeling and this spectrum. And so we go through these polarities of experience, and my thinking around what healthy looks like, what versus unhealthy looks like, is that we need to learn. It's kind of like sight, the element of sight, and it's like we're looking at an object. It's a glass of water, let's say, and numbness as a coping. The glass of water is an emotion, is a feeling, right? Some of us go numb, meaning the glass of water is too far. It's too far away from us to see it. We can't see it. It's really, really far. I don't even know what's in that distant place there. On the opposite end of the spectrum, we can put the glass of water really, really close to us. And it's very intense. I don't even know what's going on here. It's just in my face. And you're really struggling. So feelings and working healthily with feelings is about right-sizing the placement of the feeling. So where I'm trying to head to with this is understanding what's ours and what's someone else's. Right? Now, this child who's been just shamed doesn't know that potentially something was happening with their mother. It was a projection, or their father. Right? It's just felt deeply within themselves. And so without emotionalization, it would just sound something like this. Johnny or Mary, would it be okay to cut the vegetables thinner? I noticed last time that they were thicker and we undercooked them. Thanks. There's no charge in that. And so what happens then, I'm kind of going backwards and forwards here between healthy and not healthy, but what happens is, as children, we begin to right-size feelings. So we start to learn how to right-size feelings. And if parents started to call out, hey, how I was angry at you last time and how I was really projecting a lot of fear, I'd weaponized my emotions. Those were things that I shouldn't have done to you because I hurt you when I did that. I'm sorry. And know that that's daddy's, or know that that's mummy's stuff. That's nothing to do with you. We start to teach others what is theirs and what's ours. And we, in effect, as adults, have to relearn this, right? We've learned it through a whole series of just life experiences and coping mechanisms that we've learned from parents, from society, etc. And I'll just make a point about observation versus judgment. Where's the difference? A lot of people say, oh, judgment, you're judging me. I'll use this example of, let's say, let's say someone's wearing green shoes, and I notice that person wearing green shoes, and I say, oh, look, yeah, cool, green shoes. I see them. There's no shame, there's no fear, there's no disgust. But if there's no emotional bias, but if I say, ew, oh, green shoes, there's a look of disgust on my face. It comes with a look. And there's a projection. I'm disgusted by what's going on. It's almost as though I'm looking at toxic milk. Now imagine if I do that towards a person. That person's going to feel like toxic milk. They're going to feel like they're poison. But we do this all the time to people. And that's really the energy of a projected emotion. Paula, I notice you raise your hand.
So I just have a question around that, because, we're talking about what would deem to be in inverted commas negative emotions here. So if I were to say like, oh, look at your lovely green shoes, technically I'm projecting a positive emotion onto the situation, which is often desirable and creates clinging in an individual, So, talking about this from a so-called negative perspective and the projection of shame or disgust or whatever that might be. On the flip side of that is that positive projection, which again is a projection nonetheless.
Yes.
And if I'm hearing you correctly, we were talking about a neutrality, really, that we're not giving our stuff to others.
Yes.
But then, like, wherein lies the experience of the moment? Like, if the feeling is neutral, or if we're trying to sort of get to this non-projected experience with the person, wherein lies the feeling of the exchange? Or the, like, yeah. I don't know if that I'm asking the question right, but it's like,
yeah.
What's left if we're not, if we just go green shoes, and everyone's like, okay, yeah, green shoes,
yeah.
So it's like, where in that, where does the relational artistry come in when you like observing the green shoes
This is,
without putting disgust with it?
yeah, and this is an art. I don't think that there's an answer to this. I think that we actually go through a whole spectrum of this, but a spectrum of this, what you're calling, positive and negative in my likes and dislikes. And this for me is about sharing of preference. Like, we can be excited in sharing a preference. Wow, I really like that. I really like what you're doing here. Whether another person decides to decide that they're going to wear green shoes for now because I want Paula to like me all the time, that's up to them. It's not up to us. Right? We see something, we say something. And how that's interpreted is none of our business, really. Whether someone's triggered by that or not, or whether they change their behaviors. But what we can notice, though, is like, there are some people who, especially if you're a manager of a company, right, and you've got a team of people, you can start to express really, like, say, positivity towards certain actions. Oh, wow, this is incredible. This is amazing. I love the way you formatted this presentation. And now you notice that, like, your whole team's put everything in pink or in green. The formatting suddenly changed. And for you, you're like, oh, fantastic. Everyone just went to with my preference. That's just my personal preference. And you're like, great. But it is subconsciously, to some degree, in unawareness, some controlling traits, some perhaps even narcissistic traits, that we use positivity and we use negativity to get an outcome, to get a certain outcome. Right? And the fact that we're pleasantly surprised by that, or we like that, it's a process of awareness. So if we notice that happening, we can sort of start to say to ourselves, well, what does that mean for me? Not for them, but for me. And we can start to call that out in a room. Like, I noticed that after I commented last week about how I loved the slides being in pink and green, that all of the slides I'm getting now are pink and green. Thank you for that. We can appreciate it. But, or I want you to retain something that I think is really important, is our sovereignty. Because through all of this emotional weaponization, really, truly, what has been weaponized is, what is our free will? What is our free will? Sovereignty, for me, means we are able to express our free will at all times, no matter what, without any fear of it being shunned, rejected, disgusted at. That's my exercise of my rights. That for me is empowerment, right? And if we are to want to be self-empowered and self-empowering people, we have to start look at what sovereignty means for ourselves and what it means for other people. Because emotional weaponization is a tool against sovereignty. It takes away our sovereignty. It takes away our ability to express our free will. What happens when that ability is taken away from us? We get angry. We're hurt. We're in pain. We feel disrespected. We feel like when we weren't trusted. And so it creates a raft of other issues around it. And it's not to stop ourselves from making observational remarks or to stop having preferences. Preferences are a core part of self-realization and self-awareness. What do I mean by that? I mean, we only know who we are through our likes and dislikes. I know Chris is Chris because I love matcha ice cream. That's a part of Chris. I know Chris is Chris because I don't like cream-colored shoes. That's Chris. I know myself more now because I experienced that. And so this is a process of self-realization and self-awareness that as babies we don't really have. And so it's not about expressing it or not expressing in my perspective, about expressing preferences, likes and dislikes. I mean, this is the whole of social media, right? It's a core part of ourselves. It's a core part of understanding who we are and who other people are. I know Paula likes this and this and this, and that's how I know Paula. I know she doesn't like this and this and this and this. That's how I know Paula. We associate all these different things about a person and who they are to what they like and what they dislike. But my commentary around it is just to note when emotions are packed into a statement. Does that help? Yeah, I'm sorry there's not really one do this, you know. It's an art. And the path of neutrality, as you referred to a little bit earlier, is that, for me, is this exploration of all our likes and dislikes. And it's only, and the Kabbalah, I don't know if anyone has studied this, talks about like vessels of experience. And it's like when we have completed one vessel of experience and we have the same experience over and over and over and over again, we then have filled that vessel and we're like, okay, I'm done with that experience. I'm moving on to the next. And I think it's similar to these preferences and our likes and what we want to do and what we don't want to do, is that they're kind of like vessels of experience that we're filling up. It's not to stop filling them up, but when we have filled up enough of these vessels, we actually begin to walk the middle way. It's not from being anti this or anti that. It's, I've experienced it all, positive and negative, and I get it and I can feel it all, the positive and the negative, and all of the hurt that's interwrapped between all of that. And so now I'm walking the middle way because I get it all. Yeah. Sal, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Paula, I think, Chris, when Chris says that, it's all about, it's bringing your awareness to that precise situation that is happening or whatever caught your attention. But I think the way that, the way that Chris is presenting it, if we're looking at it from, raising children, it would be completely different than in a boardroom. So raising children, you would really need to be aware of what your actions are and what you're choosing and how you're teaching and reacting. Whereas in the boardroom, the majority of the adults, of course, depending on which boardroom you're sitting in, I think, again, it depends on how many people there are even consciously aware of what's happening. But then you're dealing with some of their stuff that was created by their parents and their pasts, right? And I think that's kind of where I think that it's important for me, what I'm taking out of this work is to be really aware. And I think that you learn to walk that middle ground as you're getting older rather than when you're younger, because you're still building your programming.
Yep. Any other questions? Okay. I'm going to dive into what happens when they were weaponized towards us. Okay, can everyone see that in its perspective? We weren't there for the children, so we're being attacked. So it's emotional weaponization, where they're just shocked and stuck. It's a coping mechanism. Some people call it conditioning. Some people call it programming. But they're walls nonetheless, and they're walls to not be hurt over and over again, to not feel pain or conditions. That's what makes us angry. Someone's killed. Touched at our core, touched a sore point for us. But what do we do as humans? We're like, you triggered me, blah, 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 blah. And we want to blame another person. What we tend to do less of is say, how am I going to open my heart again with this trigger? We don't use the trigger to say, how can I take down my wall? No, we generally say, how can I put up more walls? How am I going to run away from this person? How am I going to not ever need to see this person again? How am I going to keep my walls up or build another protection mechanism for myself? No one says, I want to let my walls down. Mine.
Escape, run away. I don't feel good. Yeah, I'm in Zen, and all of a sudden you come here to rock me. I'm going to run and do a meditation. Just hang tight. I just love that, because you know what? It happens on both ends of the spectrum. Been there, done that.
Yep. Guilty also, totally. So
I have a question.
Yep.
So ultimately, what we're noticing here are the tactics and the strategies that we have, which are these walls, which keep us from the feeling that's arising.
Yep.
And really what we should be seeking to do is go fully into the feeling, no matter how vulnerable or scary that might be, to either feel the rage or feel the pain, or whatever's happening in that moment is actually what we need to move towards, as opposed to self-regulate by going, I'm just going to go and have my quick meditation to calm down type of thing.
You got it.
Is that the lead?
That's the way I'm preaching, is what I call intimacy. It's getting intimate with the feeling. It's about right-sizing the feeling so we're not numb to it, and we're also not putting it too close to our face, that we turn into what people call the super empath, and everything is overwhelming to us. Right-sizing it. And I'm not going into any tools here or exercises to, learn this discernment, but often I say, discern the truth, discern this. With emotions, there needs to be discernment too. Discernment in right-sizing something, that we're placing it at a point in our whole body that we're able to work with it. And finally, working with it really means coming to a space of empathy, not related to the empath that people label as the oversensitive one, but empathy, which is a heartfelt embrace of the emotion that's arising. And if we're scared, like I give an example of fear. When I quit my job, I would have these moments where I'd wake up at nighttime at 3 a.m. and suddenly would have all this fear and paranoia rise in my body about financial stability. Oh my God, what am I going to do to pay the mortgage or pay this or pay that, and what's going to happen? And so instead of going numb to that and going, oh, it doesn't matter, or letting it go really, really on the opposite side of like, oh, paranoia, I just allowed that energy the space to breathe and flow through my body to engulf me as it needed, and work it in the space where I could still continue to see what that emotion and that feeling was trying to tell me. Because there's information there that I'm needing to act on, actually. And it's not that because the emotion it has an intelligence, and it's saying to me, Chris, you need to have a look at restructuring, or doing this, or doing that, or think about this. Think about what about how you're going to bring in income from this, or stop spending so much here. There's information in that. It's asking us to take action, actually. Because how am I going to know that if I'm numb to it? And how am I going to do anything about it if I'm completely overwhelmed and totally engulfed by it again and again and again? So there's a process of right-sizing it. And this is the same for any emotion. Comes, and we work with it. We get intimate with it. So what I want to say about all of these walls, the other point I want to make before we close out is these walls, remember, we created them. Yeah, we created them. I created them. But it was out of other people's hurting of us that I had to build them. And it's through other people wanting to control me, to step on my sovereignty. And I agreed to that. I literally agreed to that. That creates something I call the mold. And it's like this template. And I say it kind of comes from the matriarch. It's this queen bee. And as a queen bee, she wants everything to replicate in her form. And this is really a trait of what we find ourselves trying to fit into. Right? And we've been shaped and molded. And this mold has been etched in via pain. And we stop being empowered. We stop being self-loving. And we stop being self-worthy of our own truth. We become worthy to someone else's truth of who they want us to be. And this is really something I'll dive into a lot more next week, because this is the beginnings of some more advanced things about describing, beyond emotional weaponization, the construct of what I call the matrix, and how society has wanted to shape us and control us through these emotions. So this is really the basics of emotional weaponization. Does anyone have any questions around, in particular, like what's mine and what's someone else's? Because I'm not sure I've fully gone into that very much. comments?
No, Chris, I think we're pretty good because we're all here and we kind of know that there's programs within us that need to be looked at a little bit more closely. So, and I know for myself, I'd love for you to come up with something for kids. This is great work, and it's beautiful for adults, for boardrooms, for corporations. Now if we can get Chris to get on the bandwagon for some of us to help some of those young uns that have been programmed. Get them while they're young.
Yeah, these workshops that I've designed and created are really for... There's a whole series called Becoming Your Own Leader. And this addresses the mold and the weaponization. And it's more so for parents or people who find themselves in places of leadership. And instead of projecting, we often end up in these places just simply because we're really good at what we do. It doesn't mean that we're fantastic at being leaders. We're not really given much training in that sense, and whatever training we've done is not psychological training. And so yeah, it's a series for parents and for like leaders, people in leadership positions, to understand these concepts, to come back to what does it mean to lead by example rather than leading through fear, shame, and disgust. When the parents get it, it's much easier for the children to get it. If the parents don't get it, I'm not sure that there's much point in teaching the children yet, because they're just going to get hurt over and over again by their parents who haven't done the work. And so opening up your walls, for instance, in a relationship where you're constantly getting hurt, it's a toxic relationship and this person is constantly hurting you again and again and again, it's kind of counterproductive to opening yourself up, because it's re-traumatization. And so there needs to be a really deep understanding of emotional weaponization first, so that, like, by the parent, so that the child understands, like, okay, my parents are weaponizing their emotions towards me now, and as a child I'm going to call them out. Mom, stop hurting me. You're projecting shame towards me. Dad, you're making me feel scared. The parent has to have the ability to sit back and reflect on that. If not, they're just going to do it again and again and again, and then it perpetuates the cycle, and it's anti-productive for the child, because then you've kind of taken away their coping mechanism. You see, these coping mechanisms, it's armor, it's defense, it's our ability to live in this emotionally charged world, full of pain and full of hurt and full of suffering. It's our coping mechanism. And if we begin to remove those walls or shine a light on them, we're stuck in a really, really vulnerable place. And sometimes people who do this dive into this inner shadow work are sort of stuck in between no man's land, stuck on the bridge where part of them's not the old anymore and the whole of them is not the new. And they're stuck in this in-between land, living out emotional turmoil with themselves again and again and again, not knowing what to do. Stuck in unhealthy relationships with others and with themselves. It's toxic. If we can't learn to take away, say, the loops, emotional loops, for ourselves, if we're angry for being angry, if we're shamed for being shamed, and we don't delete the conditioning, getting vulnerable to that just simply means we hurt ourselves more. So I think eventually, yeah, there's got to be, I would love to design a program, but I think that kind of like Steiner's schools, where it's more holistic. There's like there's a living and breathing community that is around it and supports it and is into his work and into his studies. So the parents are studying it, and there's the medical side, there's the psychological side, there's the teaching side, there's the dancing and movement side. It's like it's all encompassing. I think I wouldn't release snippets here and there, because I think sometimes doing snippets here and there can be dangerous. It's like sometimes it's like dropping into a plant medicine journey can sometimes be dangerous, right? Like you're suddenly shown all this darkness and shadowy aspects of yourself that you're like confronted with, and you're like, what the hell do I do about this? Or you do a 7-day retreat and you're deep diving into emotions, either a men's group, women's group, mixed group, whatever that may be. All this stuff comes up for you, and then the retreat is over and you're like, what the hell am I supposed to do with this? And you're like, that retreat was more traumatizing, or that plant journey was more traumatizing for me than healing. And so I think there's a risk in doing little snippets of deep dives. And this is why I'm keeping like these series which are going on YouTube very dry and theoretical, rather than diving deeply into the exercises, because I know the risk of someone doing an exercise. It opens Pandora's box, and they're like, what the hell do I do with this? There's an accountability for me as someone who's sharing this, to know my audience. Yeah. And it's impossible for me to know everything about who's going to tune in, but there are steps that I can take to, like, say, mitigate that risk, to make it as gentle and as easy as possible to start to become intimate with these emotions. I know some people like start reading emotional books on emotions, and they might get to page 5 and they're just crying and crying and crying. And they're like, I can't go any further into this book. It's done. I'm done. It's over. Why? Because it's reliving a pain. And so sometimes people go, I don't need to relive that pain anymore. I'm fine. I'm coping just fine. I'm going to leave my walls up. This is a really courageous thing to do, to be able to start, to even want to break down those walls to get to our heart.
What you're referring to, Chris, is the difficulty that you have is the responsibility, because you don't have the aftercare. So when you're looking at individuals that are going through what's coming up, they need some form of an aftercare, which isn't something that you've created yet. Is that what you're referring to?
See, Brian. No, people are coming for sessions. But not everyone might have the money to pay for that. I might not have the time for that, There might be stigmas to calling someone for help. It's difficult to give that one-on-one attention what it deserves. If these videos go viral on YouTube and a million people are watching it, I'm not going to be able to cater for that many people coming for help. I just don't know, right? And this is part of, like, building a community is really what I'm trying to hopefully do, is build a community where when we come out of the backside of what's going on with humanity right now, we're going to need hundreds of thousands of healers and therapists and coaches and all of this to digest all of this, is my sense of it. And so I'm trying to give it in really bite-sized chunks. But I recognize the need for it. Yeah, totally.
No, it's great work. And I'm just going to say thank you so much, Chris, and great seeing everyone here, and I'll see you next week. I have to tune out here.
Thanks, Sal.
Got a few commitments, okay? Thank you.
Ciao, ciao. Any other questions? Okay. If not, I think we've done well, better for time today, 1 hour and 10. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Same time next Friday. For those of you about to go to sleep, good night, and for those of you just woken up, enjoy your day. It's good to see you all again.
Thank you.
As always, any questions that come up, send them through. All right.
Will do.
Love you all. Ciao, ciao.